I never became Formula One world champion. That is the first thing people remind me of, as if I might have forgotten. But here is something curious. Many of those who did win the championship have told me I was the driver they feared most on certain days, especially in the rain. 6 times I stood on top of the podium at Le Mans. I raced in an era when drivers died regularly, and I survived. I pushed cars to their limits at Spa, at the Nürburgring, at circuits that no longer exist because they were simply too dangerous. And yet, the one title that defines greatness in single-seater racing always slipped through my fingers. Endurance racing teaches you patience. Formula One sometimes punishes you for having it. I do not say this with bitterness. I say it because it is true. Looking back now at 81, I understand something I could not see when I was 25. I was not shaped by victories. I was shaped by the men who made winning almost impossible. People ask me who my toughest rival was. The answer is not simple. Each of these 5 drivers challenged me in a completely different way, and each time I had to become a different racer to survive. These are not just names from the past. These are the men who forced me to evolve. The first man who taught me that speed is not everything. When I arrived at Ferrari in 1968, I was young, fast, and convinced that raw pace could solve anything. Then I met Jack Brabham on the grid, and nothing about him made sense to me at first. He was over 40, in a sport that consumed young men. He was still there, still winning, still dangerous. 3 world championships already behind him. But what troubled me most was not his record, it was his calmness. Jack Brabham understood racing in a way very few drivers ever did. Brabham did not just drive his car, he built it. He understood every bolt, every spring rate, every fraction of performance hidden in the engineering. On a single qualifying lap, I could match him, sometimes beat him, but across an entire race distance, he was almost impossible to break. He never overdrove, he never wasted his tires chasing a gap that would come to him anyway. He simply waited and struck when it mattered. I was the opposite. In my early races, I pushed too hard in the opening laps, burning through my advantage before half distance. Watching Brabham taught me something I desperately needed to learn: managing pace, managing tires, managing yourself. These matter as much as outright speed. The 1969 season proved it. Brabham, nearly 20 years older than me, fought wheel to wheel with drivers half his age and gave nothing away. He was the first rival who made me understand that an intelligent driver is more dangerous than a fast one. That was my first lesson in survival. The shadow I never stepped beyond in Formula One. If Brabham taught me how to survive, Jacky Stewart showed me what perfection looked like and how far I was from it. Between 1969 and 71, Stewart was operating at a level that made the rest of us question our own methods. He drove for Tyrrell, and together they built something almost mechanical in its consistency. Stewart did not win races with spectacular overtakes or heroic drives through the rain, although he could do both. He won because he eliminated mistakes. Every qualifying lap was precise, every race was managed, every point was collected. Stewart made very few mistakes. That's why he was so difficult to beat. Our styles could not have been more different. I relied on instinct, on reading the conditions, on adapting in the moment. Stewart relied on preparation, on doing everything right before the lights even went out. On my best days, particularly when the circuit was wet, I could beat him. I knew that, and he knew that. But here is the truth I had to accept. He did not have bad days. I did. The 1971 season made it painfully clear. Stewart dominated from the first race to the last. It was not his car alone. It was the way he extracted everything without ever exceeding the limit. That year, I understood for the first time that speed and instinct were not enough to win a championship. You needed perfection in every small detail, at every single round. Jacky Stewart was the standard I always measured myself against in Formula One. I came close, but I never quite reached it. The only one who made me want to win and want to stop at the same time. Every driver in that era knew the risks. We accepted them because we had no choice, or perhaps because we were too young to fully understand what acceptance meant. But with Jochen Rindt, risk was not something hiding in the background. It was right there, visible in every lap he drove. Jochen was probably the fastest of us all. I say that without hesitation. In 1970, the championship fight came down to the two of us, my Ferrari against his Lotus. I believed that season was mine. I had the car, I had the experience from 2 hard years in Formula One, and I had the patience that Brabham and Stewart had taught me. But Rindt had something none of us could match: raw, unmistakable speed. His qualifying laps were frightening. Not just fast, violent. The Lotus 72 was a brilliant machine, but fragile, and Rindt drove it beyond what anyone thought the car could take. His teammates feared for him, his engineers feared for him, I feared for him, and I was the one trying to beat him. Then came Monza, September 1970. I will not describe what happened. Those who were there do not need reminding, and those who were not do not need the images. What I will say is this: one moment I had a rival who pushed me harder than anyone ever had. The next moment he was gone. The championship continued, but something inside it had changed. The points, the standings, the calculations, they all suddenly felt small. Jochen Rindt became the only driver in Formula One history to be crowned world champion after his death. I finished that season second. People sometimes ask whether I wish things had ended differently, whether I wanted that title. The honest answer is I wanted to beat Rindt. I wanted to beat him on the track at full speed, both of us crossing the finish line. I never wanted it like this. That rivalry changed me more than any other. It forced me to confront a question that no amount of talent or courage can answer. Where exactly is the line between bravery and recklessness? After 1970, I never looked at racing the same way again. Jochen was faster than me. I have never been afraid to admit that. But after Monza, I no longer wanted to compare. Some victories carry a price that is too high. The most dangerous rival sometimes sits right next to you. Everyone assumes that your greatest battles happen against drivers in different teams on the other side of the grid. But in 1970, the most complicated fight I had was not with Rindt or Stewart. It was with the man who shared my own garage. Regazzoni arrived at Ferrari the same year Rindt and I were fighting for the championship. He was fast, aggressive, and absolutely determined to prove himself. I respected that. Every driver who reaches Formula One has that fire. But what made Clay difficult was something beyond speed. Clay never accepted being number 2. That made things complicated. He was my teammate, but he was not my ally in a season where every single point mattered, where the championship against Rindt was being decided by the smallest margins. I needed Ferrari to work as one unit behind me. That never happened. Clay raced for himself, and I cannot entirely blame him for that. A racing driver's instinct is to win, not to follow. The Italian Grand Prix that year was the perfect example. Regazzoni won at Monza, a tremendous result for him personally, a proud moment for any driver. But for the championship mathematics, it was a complication. Points that could have closed the gap to Rindt were instead split within the team. I never confronted Clay about this. It would have been pointless. He was doing what any competitor would do. But I learned something that season that no amount of track time could teach. In motorsport, you do not only race against the cars in front of you, you manage the politics inside your own garage. And if you fail at that, it does not matter how fast you are. The pressure that cost me the most in 1970 did not come from the car ahead. It came from the car beside me. It did not defeat me, the era did. By the late 1970s, Formula One was no longer the sport I had entered a decade earlier. The cars looked different, behaved different, demanded something different from the driver. And no one understood that shift better than Mario Andretti. Ground effect changed everything. Suddenly, the car's speed came not from the engine or the driver's bravery, but from aerodynamics, from the way air moved underneath the body. The Lotus 79 that Andretti drove in 1978 was not just fast, it was a machine from another philosophy entirely. The ground effect cars required a completely different approach. I tried to adapt, every driver did, but I belong to a generation that felt the car through the steering wheel, through the seat, through the vibration in our hands. Bakul's strove by instinct and by sensation. The ground effect era asked for something else, a technical understanding of airflow and downforce that was closer to engineering than to driving. Andretti had that understanding. He worked with his engineers not just as a driver giving feedback, but as a partner shaping the concept of the car itself. In 1978, he and the Lotus were nearly untouchable. I watched this transformation and recognized something painful. This was not a battle I could win by trying harder. The gap was not about talent. It was about evolution. The sport had moved into a new chapter, and my instincts, the very things that had carried me through Spa in the rain and Le Mans in the dark, were no longer enough in Formula One. So I made a choice. I stepped away from the world of single-seaters and turned fully toward endurance racing. It was not surrender, it was clarity. Le Mans rewarded exactly what I was, a driver who could read conditions, manage a race over hours instead of minutes, and find speed through patience rather than aerodynamic theory. Mario Andretti did not defeat me. Time defeated me. Andretti was simply the one who made it impossible to look away. And rather than fight an era I did not belong to, I chose a different road, one that led to 6 victories at Le Mans. That was the best decision of my career. 5 rivals, 1 evolution. I have been asked many times what it takes to survive in motorsport for as long as I did. The answer is not bravery. It is not talent. It is the willingness to be changed by the people who challenge you. Brabham taught me that survival begins with intelligence, not speed. Stewart showed me what perfection demands and how far I stood from it. Rindt forced me to stare at the line between courage and recklessness, and that line has never been clear since. Regazzoni reminded me that the most dangerous threat does not always come from the car in front. Sometimes it sits in your own garage. And Andretti made me see that when an era moves beyond you, the wisest thing is not to fight it, but to find where you truly belong. Racing is not only about being fast, it's about understanding the situation. People ask me whether I regret never becoming world champion. I tell them this: I raced against the greatest drivers on the most dangerous circuits through the most brutal years this sport has ever known. My rivals were not just men, they were chapters in the history of racing. And I was there for every chapter. At 81, I understand something clearly now. My toughest rivals were never just drivers. They were eras.